In this episode, we speak to Neil Keating, founder of Experience Collab, about the concept of experience, the definition of experience, and how to measure it using experience data, operational data, and technology data. Neil suggests that experience is horizontal across the organization, whereas XLAs are vertical. We delve into the importance of emotions and logic in what constitutes an experience. We discuss the rise of AI and automated services. Neil explains Affective Science, which teaches us that emotions are a physical thing, i.e. the hair on the back of our neck stands up, we become embarrassed, we start to perspire, and the impact this can have on our personal preferences regarding human or AI services. We finish the episode by discussing Experience Collab's ultimate goal, which is to empower the experience economy. Tune in to find out how to embolden your user and customer experience. Welcome to this episode of Implementing Best Practice in Business. We are here to help you and your organization understand and implement global best practice to help you face the business challenges of today. Join me, Richard Pharro, CEO of APMG International, in talking to leaders and practitioners who have applied these frameworks and practices to boost their productivity. They're here, willing to share their knowledge and experience to help you learn from them so you can do the same to make you more competitive in today's market. My guest today is Neil Keating, founder of Experience Collab. Neil's career has been in professional services and he's worked in a range of industries focused on helping them improve efficiency and effectiveness. For the last 5 years, Neil's been at the forefront in the design and development of experience frameworks, consultancy products and education. Last year, together with a business partner, Neil acquired Experience Collab, where they've set out to build a collaboration of like-minded organizations focused on changing the way organizations report the success of IT and enabling them to measure success based upon the experience of those people consuming it. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I hadn't heard about experience level agreements until about 2 or 3 years ago. Where did they originate? And most importantly, what's the business problem they're trying to address?
Well, it's a good point. And lots of people still haven't heard of experience level agreements, to be honest with you. But it's actually been around for quite a while. We've been doing this since about 2016, 17 in various different guises. We've been considering what customers need to do to improve their services, and experience seems to be the key thing that people should focus on. But even before we started out there and we started to build our frameworks and the models that are now in our classes, the concept of experience actually goes back quite a long way, particularly experience in any economy. So in 1999, there was two guys called Pine and Gilmore, two authors in the US. And they wrote a book called Welcome to the Experience Economy. Essentially what they said is that any economy in the world, IT, airlines, fast food, whatever you want to call it, will go through at least 4 stages of maturity development. And possibly more, but at least 4 stages. And they're commodity, product, service, and experience. And so you can track any particular industry, and you can think, where is that in that whole experience chain? How mature are they? Are they in service, are they in product, are they in commodity, or are they in experience? And so when we think about IT, when I started out in IT, it was very much at the commodity end. So I started out and people built their own PCs. You could buy processors from one area and memory chips from another and screens from somewhere else. And it was very much commodity. You couldn't distinguish one from the other. But then as people started to really kind of get into IT and it started to sell more, people like Dell, people like HP started to productize it. So you ended up with different laptops, different desktops. And if you went and bought lots of equipment for your organization, you wouldn't just say, I have 1,000 laptops. You'd say, I want 200 sales laptops, and there'll be student laptops. There's desktops for less mobile workers. You end up with laptops for gamers. So all of these suddenly became productized. And then in about 2000 or so, as the hardware became cheaper, organizations started to develop services. And I worked in most MSPs, as you said a few moments ago. And most of my career has been thinking about, well, what services do we need to develop? So as hardware became cheaper, MSPs, closely followed by IT departments, started to think, well, let's develop services. So we had onshore services, offshore services, nearshore services, remote services, proactive services, network services. You name it, we kind of had it. And every single one of those services had service level agreements associated with it. And the problem with those was they were all done in their isolated silos. So you had service level agreements for service desk, service level agreements for network, service level agreements for desktop, etc. But what we've realized is experience is horizontal. And so therefore, you telling me you've kept your servers up when actually my desktop's crashed also means I've had a very poor experience. So one of the issues we found is going back a few years, as we've now moved from the service economy, as people are now saying, our customers, our consumers, the people we're there to support, essentially saying, well, is that it? You just deliver all these service level agreements, yet my experience isn't very good. And what people are now thinking about is, I want outcomes. I really want an outcome. And what SLAs are driving are outputs. So if you think about an SLA is telling you to keep a server up. Well, how long for? Well, 99% of the time over a week. I want you to answer tickets. Well, how quickly? I want you to answer them in 4 hours if it's a P3. That's an output. Good thing to do, but it's an output. And what customers now want is outcomes. And I guess if you really want to think about experience and where does it come from, it comes from actually our customers saying to us, we want outcomes. We want to be made productive. We want to be helped to become more innovative. Not just you telling us you've done some stuff in IT. It has to be relevant for us, and it has to drive our outcome. And that's really the problem that it's trying to solve. It goes back a long way, but the problem fundamentally it's trying to fix here is, how do we measure whether we're delivering our business the right outcomes?
Neil, measuring an experience outcome, that's a huge challenge, isn't it? Because, in my understanding, an experience is a personal emotion. I'm either happy with something or I'm not happy. So when you talk about an organization outcome at an experience at an emotional level, that must be a huge challenge to measure it. And I suppose my other comment about this at the moment is, with companies introducing more automated services, so, you ring up and it's say, your call is very important to us, press 1 for this, press 4 for that. You get through to somebody, you give them all your details, they say, I'll put you through to another department, you give them all your details again. So you have a very bad experience on that because you can't talk to a knowledgeable human being to start with. So, 2 questions for you. How do you measure a personal emotion if that is what experience is? And with the rise of AI and automated systems, are you actually, a bit like King Canute, are you trying to sort of fight the tide that's coming in with automation?
Actually, it's a good point. And there are some sciences, interesting, behind what we do. So when we think about experience, one of the key sciences we think about is a science called affective science. And affective science teaches us that emotions actually are a physical thing. So an emotion is normally something that happens to you following something you've just experienced, and it's a physical thing. So you can measure emotions, and it's measured physically. So when you come to measure an emotion, it's normally measured by hair standing up the back of your neck, eye movement, sweat, heartbeat, those kind of things. Whereas a feeling happens straight after your emotion. But it's your brain applying your logic to something you've just had an emotion about, right? So that's a feeling. So emotions are physical and feelings are logical. And therefore, I guess, everybody is wired slightly differently. All our brains have a very slightly different logic because of our upbringing and our experiences in life. And so we all have slightly different logic in our brains. And therefore, you answer your first question, are we, fighting against a tide of cost savings about chatbots and virtual agents and the like, and all this automation? Does that have a conflict with people's having a good experience? The answer is yes. For some people, it absolutely will. And there's been independent studies done by some of our experienced sort of vendors that will tell you that there are certain groups of people and certain individuals that prefer human interaction to fixing something or solving something. That's where they get most value. out of a human interaction with something than they do using automated channels. And if they're forced to use those automated channels, they will have a poor experience. So that's the first thing. However, you quite rightly pointed out as well that this is happening. There is a tide of people doing this. Cost is really important. Some companies don't have a lot of choice. Some companies are saying we have to put automated channels in to save cost. And therefore, it's a given. I guess also importantly, it's not everybody who might have a bad experience with that channel. There are certain groups of people who would enjoy using an automated channel rather than human interaction. And I'll give you a very personal example. If I book a restaurant, and this might show my age thing here, but if I book a restaurant or a hotel of some form, I'm very likely to call them. I'm very likely to want to give them a call, explain what we're doing, get it booked, get them to confirm it, and then my experience anxiety disappears because I feel I've interacted with human and what I've wanted has been booked in and we're okay. If my daughter books a restaurant or a hotel, the very last thing she wants to do is to talk to somebody, right? So she's going to do it off her phone, she's going to do it off her laptop, off her mobile device, and she implicitly trusts the technology that she's using to get it booked, get it done, and to do that job for her. So therefore, we both have the same experience. We both experience the same thing. We're both trying to book a restaurant. We're just going to do it in a different way, and we have very different perspectives on it. And actually, it's probably perspective that drives experience. So the key, I guess, you need to think about is we need to stop whatever it is we're doing. You know, if we're automating, putting in a virtual agent or chatbots or, as you said, the telephone systems that press 1 for this, 2 for that. And even if we're forced to do it by our company, but we need to stop and think, what's the perspective of the people that we're here to support? Do I have different groups of people? Will some enjoy this and will it work for some? But for others, maybe it doesn't. And then how do I make this experience the best I can possibly make it for those other people? If it's a given and I can't afford choice, if I can put choice in, brilliant, I'll give them choice. So you can ring and you can use our virtual agent and people have that choice. And that's where a lot of IT departments are doing because that gives everyone the relevant experiences. If you can't even give choice because budget or resource constraints, then what you have to do is stop and think, well, how do I make this experience? I'm going to have to do it, but even then stop. How do I make this experience the best I can be? And how do I help those people who perhaps don't want this to happen to understand it, educate them, culturally change the environment to enable them to get the best out of this technology? You have to stop and think about perspective. That's the way to handle it, I think, to make sure you're improving people's experience.
Fascinating. So Experience Collab defines experience as that emotion. You can measure it by the physical reaction of somebody that's consuming your product at the time they're consuming it. Is that correct?
Well, so we define experience really as how someone feels. So that emotion is that instant physical response. But actually the step that happens minutes afterwards is that logical response. And that's actually how you probably define experience better. So we define experience as really, how does someone feel? So how do they feel about you? How do they feel about your product? How do they feel about the services you provide? How do they feel about working at the company? If you're thinking about it from an IT perspective, how do they feel whether IT is enabling them to do their job? Do they feel productive? Or do they feel inhibited by IT? So for us, it's about feelings. And we're trying to measure how do people feel, because that's going to drive all sorts of other things. So feelings will drive behavior, and it might be the outcomes we're trying to drive. We want people to be productive, so we need to make sure they feel that they're enabled to do their job for us. But the key thing when you're thinking about defining experience, and we define it as that feeling, is recognizing a couple of other things as well. And one of those things that we sort of, in our classes, we teach people is that experience is cumulative. So experience is happening all the time. So it's a build-up of things that experience is. So if you come to ask someone how they feel, they're going to go back in their mind to all the things they can remember, all those interactions they've had with you over time, and they're going to remember, well, what are the positive, which ones are the negative, and they will come to a logical conclusion. Now, even if something bad's happened recently, that might take higher currency. They might think about that more. But even then, they will go back over time and they'll think, well, look, I've been here 3 years. I know IT's had a bad time in the last 3 months, but prior to that, it was pretty good. So I'm not delighted about everything, but I'm at the very least comfortable. And so we define it as feelings. And what we're trying to do, I guess, is to make people feel comfortable. But it's about making them feel comfortable over time. It's a cumulative view of things. We're interacting with our devices and our applications and our software. Lots of people are doing this every minute of every day. We're talking right now over communication software, and we're interacting with it, and we're having an experience of it. And therefore, it's happening all the time. So not only do we need to think about, well, how do people feel about these various different things, we also need to think about, well, how do they feel cumulatively? So it's not just a single moment in time. Perhaps like a service level agreement is typically a single moment in time. End of a month, how did that work? Okay, discuss it, close it, move on. Experience is cumulative. So we think about it cumulatively and we measure it cumulatively, but we also need to view it cumulatively as well. So we don't want to look at just that single moment in time. We need to look at that collection of moments in time that over a period of time think, is experience generally going up? Is experience going down? Or is experience staying the same? And we have to look at it over a longer period than perhaps we look at traditional metrics for. So really for us, it's about feelings, but feelings over a period of time.
That's fascinating, Neil. And the way you describe it there, it's not just IT, is it? I mean, that would be anything that you experience with an organization. So, before COVID, when I used to fly quite a lot, I would go with certain airlines because I always had a good experience with those airlines, even if they were more expensive than something else, and, they had aeroplanes. So if one was cancelled, there was usually one there. And that does build up an awful lot of loyalty to that brand. So are the thing you're doing around experience, is that about driving brand loyalty across the piece rather than just actually with the IT shop? Is that a fair summary? Does it move beyond, the IT business into the whole business and the relationship the business has with its customers?
Definitely. So a lot of people in IT. So IT is now in this experience economy, as I said before. But if you think about any other industry, shops, restaurants, you talked about the airline economy there. The airline economy is certainly in the long haul airline economy definitely are in the experience economy. You're choosing your airline because you believe it's going to give you the best experience for the time you're going to be with that airline. And you're basing that on, things that you might think that's important to you over that time. So you might be thinking about menu, you might be thinking about food, you might be thinking about comfort of seats. So experience isn't just IT. Experience goes well beyond IT. If you take one of our partners at the moment are doing an XLA in onboarding. And if you think about onboarding as an experience, of course that involves IT, getting the right equipment, getting the right network, getting the right software on your laptops, getting the laptop set up and sent to somebody. But that also involves HR. HR have got to make sure that the person's there, the contract's right, that they've had their induction. It involves the leadership team. They've got to make sure they've got the right objectives. It could even involve security. Have they got the right passes? Can they get into the car park okay? So experience of someone at work isn't just an IT perspective. Experience is everything that's, anybody who's doing a service is offering and delivering some form of experience. And if you're going to be measuring experience, over time, we'll measure that across that range of things. Now, we might start out in IT, but absolutely it goes beyond IT. Totally goes beyond some of the traditional service desks and, desktop support things. We've now got customers, say we've done onboarding, they're doing office moves using exactly the same frameworks that we talked about and we educate in our classes. So, yeah, the answer to your question is yes, it goes well beyond just IT.
So, do XLAs coexist with SLAs, or do you think XLAs in a period of time will replace SLAs?
So I get asked that one quite a lot, actually, in terms of SLAs and XLAs. How do they work? How do they work together? Our classes teach the concepts that SLAs are a bit like watermelons, and if people recognise that, then you can kind of work with them. So an SLA is a bit like a watermelon. What that means is a watermelon is green on the outside, but red in the middle. So what we're saying there is that it's all very well that IT say we've achieved our SLAs, but when you dig into that, if people are not very happy with you or they're uncomfortable with what IT are doing, then their experience is going to be poor. So, for example, if an IT department say, well, I've I've kept the server up for 99.9% over the period of a week. Yet when I came to use it, it was down. And I, by the way, run payroll, and therefore no one got paid at this company. Now tell me, IT, you think you've done a good job. So SLAs do not equal happiness. SLAs can be like the watermelon. When you get into it and you cut into them, people can still be very unhappy about you, even though you're saying you've delivered a great service because all your SLAs agree. But remember, I said before, SLAs are vertical, experience is horizontal, and therefore we need to be thinking of something different. So the thing we start talking to companies about is it's not, you don't want to be having a watermelon. You really want to be thinking about a kiwi or a lime and grow a different type of fruit, because a lime is green on the outside and green in the middle. So yes, of course it's important that we achieve our SLAs, certainly the ones that might impact experience. But what's of equal importance, if not in my opinion more important, is to make sure people are happy with actually what you're doing as well, to make sure people feel comfortable about the work that you're doing. So even though SLAs don't measure experience, they can impact it. So not picking up the phone when someone rings, having lots of outages, not resolving tickets on time or taking too long to resolve tickets is very likely going to cause an experience problem. So we call SLAs as an experience indicator. So we use them. So if sentiment tells us what people feel, the SLAs might tell us why they feel that way. So if sentiment tells us that people don't feel comfortable or don't think it's a valuable use of their time to call the service desk to fix something, the SLA actually might tell us why that might be. So sentiment tells us what people feel, but SLAs and KPIs and even technical measures will tell us why they feel that way as well. So we're combining all sorts of different experience indicators to get a rounded view of experience, both what people feel and potentially why they feel that way, or at least indications of why they feel that way. And by doing that, we can really get a good rounded view of experience. So we don't think SLAs are going away. We think they're a good quantitative measurement of things. We just think that you need to add something to it. And what you need to add to that is XLAs. And combining the two, you can really dig into and measure experience.
So in the framework that you've developed, how many indicators can an organisation sensibly measure effectively to arrive at that aggregate XLA ratio or metric or whatever you call it?
So the framework that we've put in place, there could be various. So there could be various indicators. We normally talk in the terms of 3, but there could be more. So we normally say, first of all, you've got to have sentiment. You can't have an XLA unless you're measuring sentiment. Most people get that through a survey. It doesn't have to be a survey. It could be mining data in Teams or mining data in Yammer to try and understand sentiment that way. 99 times out of 100, it's typically a survey. But you've got to get sentiment somehow. That's the first thing. So the key indicator is sentiment. You can't have an XLA without it. Then once you've got that and you've understood that, think about the other indicators you've got in your business. We normally talk in terms of 3. So we've got X data, which is experience, which is sentiment data. You've got O data, which is operational data, which is the SLAs, KPIs, how well your services performed when they needed to be performing. And then you've got T data, which is technical data, which is, well, how well did the technology that you've deployed perform as well? And it's the measurement of those 3 that gives you that rounded view, because then you're thinking about how do people feel about how well our services performed, and how do people feel about how well our technology performed? And let's look at some objective measures to say, well, how well did our technology perform, and how well did our services perform as well? And you combine all those 3 together, and you've got a really good view of experience. So they're the 3 that we typically talk about. But there could be lots of others. I mean, there are other areas. There's other operational indicators. For example, if you've just rolled out, Microsoft Zoom instead of using Microsoft Teams, how many people are using Zoom and not using Teams? How many people have used Zoom and then gone back to using Microsoft Teams? That could be an indication of experience as well. So there's lots of different measures, but you get to them over time. You'll get to them in future months, future years. Start thinking about, well, how do I measure X data? Can I combine that with O data? And most companies have O data, SLAs, KPIs. They can get X data fairly, following our framework, they can start thinking about the best way to get an X data, combine that with O data, and then start thinking about, well, how do I get technical data as well? And the rise of digital experience tools tells us that more and more people are focused on X data, O data, and T data and combining it. And that's where we start. But then could be more and more and more as you progress.
And the clients that you're working with, I would imagine they're sort of very varied, but is there a particular industry vertical, is a particular sector that's sort of buying into the concept of experience level agreements much faster, much more deeply than other sectors?
Yeah, I guess, yes, I think the answer to that question is probably it's changeable, actually, I think, Richard. What we've seen over the last X years we've been doing this is the first people who did this initially were managed service providers, actually. So we spent a lot of time with MSPs, helping them understand experience, helping them use our framework, teaching them the best practice in experience management. So MSPs were the original driver. But when you think about it, they were driven to do it because their customers demanded it. And I think there's a Gartner stat that says 2 out of every 3 tenders now mention experience level agreements. So I guess it's no surprise that MSPs were one of the first to market. Once the MSPs, and we're still working with MSPs, it's still going down, down the market there with MSPs. It's still a big area and big topic for them. But then what we start seeing is a lot of larger, well-known brands entering the market think we need to do experience as well. They've perhaps got the bigger organizations, it's harder to manage experience. Perhaps they've got more budget. And I guess particularly those organizations that use a heavy lot of IT. So, for example, professional services type companies, banking, insurance, legal, because there's an absolute direct correlation between IT issues and IT failures and people having a poor experience in IT and that company loss of income and, loss of brand reputation. So from following MSPs, we kind of saw bigger, well-known brands do it, and then lots of these professional services type companies doing it. But honestly now, I talk to our authorized training organizations. They're training lots and lots of people. It's right across the spectrum now. Some of our ATOs have been working with police forces. I know some have been working with hospitals. I know some have been working in the retail environment. And they're all delivering and measuring experience using the frameworks from Experience Collab. Because it's on the top 10 of most CIOs' agendas. No matter what the industry is now, it's on the top 10 of most CIOs' agendas. And so we're seeing it right across the industry, all different sizes now. So it's really in the mainstream, and I suspect it's going to stay there for some time.
So you've obviously got a bit of a tiger by the tail. I mean, you've been involved in this for a number of years. You've now invested heavily into Experience Collab. The market seems to be buying into this. So if we're having this discussion, say in 2026, what would success look like to you over the next sort of 2 to 3 years?
So our mission as Experience Collab, I think is really important when you think about what we're here to do. So our mission as Experience Collab is to empower the experience economy. So empowering and authorizing our authorized training partners, our authorized consulting partners to help them change the way their customers view IT and potentially beyond IT as well, as we talked about a few moments ago. So its success to us is a successful partner network and our partners educating, our partners consulting with their customers and helping them develop and measure better and manage better experiences for their employees. As we said, currently the focus around XLAs and the big drive for XLAs is really around IT. It's a big topic of IT. It's on most CIOs' agendas right now in IT. But as we discussed, it goes well beyond it as well. So it can go into HR, it can go into finance, and some of our ATOs are already pushing into those areas. So I guess ultimately success for us is that more and more customers are using experience metrics as the way to measure the success of their services. Whether that service is IT, whether that service is HR, whether that service is finance, legal, doesn't matter to us. But what's really key is that people use XLAs or experience metrics and the frameworks to say we're measuring our success by the success of the people consuming our services. And our success will ultimately be measured by the success of our ATOs and our authorised training partners and authorised consulting partners.
Fascinating. Neil, many, many thanks. Fascinating conversation to actually understand experience, emotion, feelings, and how organizations actually bring this together to improve the services they delivered. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We're always keen to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. You can find all the information in the show notes below. Please visit apmg-international.com to find out more about our accredited training and the certifications that support them that are related to the topics discussed in this series. I hope you've enjoyed today, and I look forward to you joining future episodes while we continue our exploration into best practice and the benefits it brings to global business. Thank you.